Good evening, FCBC family. Thank you so much for joining us on our How to Build Resilience conversation series. It is a three-part series where we're going to be delving into understanding what is resilience, how do we channel in and understand resilience in our lives, and also build up that resilience that is inside of us. And so we have a great show and discussion for you this evening. We have a special guest with us. And before I get to our special guest, I just kind of want to outline these next 3 weeks. So this week we have a conversation with spiritual leaders on how to build resilience. And then next week, it's going to be a workshop. So I'm going to sit down with you guys and I'm going to share all of some of the things that I've learned as a clinician and as a pastor on ways and also give you guys some practical tools and tips on how you can build resilience in 2021. And as many of us know, that 2021 just is really another calendar year over. And many of the things that are happening or that have happened in 2020, we're still in a pandemic. We're still dealing with a lot of the political and racial upheaval that is happening in this country. And so it is important, right, that we're staying strong. It is important that we remain resilient in that time. And so we will be giving you practical tools and tips in the second week. And then finally, in our third week, it is going to be a conversation with some clinicians who are going to join me to kind of delve a little bit deeper in sort of the clinical ways that we can understand how to build resilience in our lives. And so at the end of this discussion, or at the end of this, I'll say broadcast, it's in this evening, I'll give you guys an opportunity for those of you guys that are joining us to ask questions and to engage with us in conversation. So hold your questions to the end. But make sure to drop into the comments and tell us where you're from, how you're feeling today. Are you feeling resilient? Let us know in the chat. Are you feeling resilient this evening? Right? It is, like I said, it has been a very, a tough year for many of us already. And it's been 2020 was a tough year. And so we just want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. So please drop in the chat. Let us know how you're feeling. Let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're tuning in right now. And then make sure you stay engaged in the conversation. And I hope that you enjoy what I know will be a very fruitful conversation this evening. So I see all of the comments coming in. Good evening, everyone. So good to see. Well, I can't see you all, but it's so good to have you guys join us. I cannot wait to the day that we are all back in the building and that we can all see each other once again. So without further ado, I want to introduce our special guest this evening. Many of you all know her, but she is I'm trying to figure out how I want to describe her, but phenomenal pastor, phenomenal leader, phenomenal teacher, phenomenal preacher. But most importantly, right now, she is the president of New York Theological Seminary, and first and foremost, the first female president and also the first Black female president at NYTS. And so we are so honored to have her. And of course, the FCBC family, you know her, we love her. It is none other than the Reverend Dr. Lakeisha Walren. And so we're going to have her join us this evening. Hello.
Hey. How are you? So good to be here.
It is so good to have you join us.
Thank you.
I was going to say, it's, you departed, but it's so good that we can have opportunities where we can still allow you to, have you engage, because we miss you and you have so much, a wealth of knowledge from your experiences as a pastor, your experiences as an educator, as a leader, and as a preacher. And so I'm just so grateful to have you join us this evening.
Well, thank you. It's such a blessing to be here. I certainly miss everybody at FCBC. I miss our Sunday morning worship services. I joked about this before, but Pastor Mike was always telling us to hug your neighbor. You come in the morning and hug your neighbor, and during the invitation, you're hugging your neighbor, and the invocation, you're hugging your neighbor, and sometimes you would hug the same person, 4 or 5 times in one service. Like, okay, here we go again. But man, I would give anything to be able to hug and just lay hands on folks. And I just really, really miss this. And I hope people don't think that I've departed. I have not departed. I'm still there. Yes, I'm serving in a different capacity. I'm no longer the executive pastor, but certainly still serving as a preaching pastor and a teaching pastor at my home church, with my husband and with the FCBC family. So I'm so grateful for these opportunities where we can come together and still be engaged, even though we're not able to be in the building. Hey, I see you all saying hi. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Yes, I see some of the NYTS family is in the building, which is exciting. So listen, I think we made a nice merge of a family. FCBC meets NYTS. You know, we're a nice blended family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the reality is that we're doing the same work, you know, trying to help folks to live their best life, making sure folks have the tools that they need to serve in ministry, to be prepared to serve others. And so that work that I was doing at FCBC has just been extended and expanded at NYTS. And so I'm so grateful. You know, a lot of times, honestly, when you leave one position and go to another position, you really do kind of cut ties. You really are gone.
Yeah.
But to be able to still be a part of FCBC and to embrace my NYTS family, two families that I love and honor and cherish so much, is really the big blessing. It's really the cherry on top to all of this. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think we have a great opportunity for a great discussion. And I think, you know, this conversation of resilience is very much needed right now in this time when so many of us are really kind of dealing with the emotions and the grief and the losses of what 2020 was for so many of us. And I know, you know, you yourself personally and professionally have probably had to really, truly be resilient in 2020. And so I kind of actually want to start right there because Pastor Lakeisha, you run a seminary, and I can't imagine, you know, in this past year, FCBC truly had to pivot. And so we as an institution had to be resilient. I kind of want to, you know, kind of just have you share a little bit about what does it look like for a seminary in this moment in time? And what did it look like for you in 2020 for you guys to remain resilient and strong and continue on? And I know that there are so many people that were involved in that process, but I think it's important for it to kind of honor, you know, for you to share a little bit about what that experience was like, because I can imagine it was not easy.
Absolutely. And we are all still in the midst of it. And so resilience is a way of life.
Yes.
You know, the one thing that I do love about NYTS is that it had been doing great work before I ever arrived. You know, started in 1900 by Dr. White, who earned a PhD from Yale, but when he came to do ministry on the ground, felt that he wasn't prepared. And so wanted to start this school to prepare faith and thought leaders to engage in relevant, restorative, and revolutionary ministry. And that's the work that they had already been doing before I got there. And so for me, you know, coming into higher ed and certainly at a seminary, there was a huge learning curve. And there were a lot of pieces that I needed to learn and navigate. And I hadn't even been there a year when COVID hit. So I was really looking at God like, you got jokes. You really got jokes. But I can honestly say that sometimes we are so focused on what we're losing, so focused on what's wrong, so focused on what we can't do, that we miss the opportunities that are presented from us, even in the midst of our, you know, most traumatizing struggles. And so, you know, for NYTS, we have lost students to COVID. We actually lost 2 students over the Christmas break that I just found out about last week. And so we've had faculty, our staff, our board, everybody's been affected. And so trying to navigate those waters and not just uncertain waters, but it's just new terrain that we had never experienced before. And certainly me being a new president, I was really grateful to have the support of the faculty and the staff of the board. People really came together. We worked very diligently. We were able to transition from in-person to online learning. You know, that really was the first step, and not missing a beat. Most schools missed a week of classes, you know, trying to figure it out and get it together. But we have such a phenomenal team. And you know, the one of the things that I really love about NYTS is because folks are so student focused, it was really all hands on deck so that we could do what we needed to do to make sure our students could continue to get, you know, the education that they paid for and that they certainly deserved, but not without a whole lot of prayer. You know, I know we'll get to this question a little bit later, but I want to say that, you know, interestingly enough, when COVID hit, the seminary was engaged in 40 days of prayer and fasting. So
Wow.
we had already started prayer and fasting during the Lenten season, right? These are things you can't even make this up. So when
Yeah.
it hit, we were already praying every day. We were already in this season of prayer and fasting. And I do believe that that is one of the reasons that really helped us to move forward. It catapulted us. It empowered us. And so we moved forward in faith because we just really didn't have time to be scared. Now
Yes.
the fear came later. I mean, we can talk about that, how the fear came later. But in the midst of it all, we didn't really have time to be scared. We had to remain strong. We had to move forward. We knew this was going to be a difficult season, but we also trusted the same God that's brought us through
Mhm.
every other difficult season. You about to make me start preaching right now, right? Is the same God that is going to bring us through this season
Yeah.
that we're in right now. And that was the faith that we utilized as we move forward.
Right. And I think you said something very powerful, Pastor Lakeisha, which was you didn't have time to be scared.
Yeah.
Right? And I think when you think about like resilience, right, and we think about that, there's oftentimes, in this idea of being able to keep going and pushing through, it's
Yeah.
that you don't have sometimes the luxury, right? There are luxuries, right? The luxury, sometimes that can be the ability to be fearful. But in this moment in time, you were a leader. Myself as being at FCBC as a pastor and leading community engagement, it was like you said, you didn't have an opportunity to stop and be scared. The community needed you, your school, your institution needed you. And I think that's a very powerful statement. I think we're probably going to end up kind of like circling that a little bit back because it reminds me as when we were talking like an alternative viewpoint, which is sometimes in life, there are moments where God will one trust you first and foremost to handle a particular season, and you may not get that opportunity where you can allow yourself to like fully feel your emotions, but you have to keep going. And I think about like parents. That's like a huge thing for parents in this season. Like, and I know, your children are older and grown, but I can imagine like right now what it means to be resilient in this season. Why are you laughing?
No, because you said my children were grown, and so you just that kind of hit me. But you're absolutely right. Now, and I say that with caution that I didn't have time to be scared because fear is real, and
Right.
certainly it was an emotion that did sneak up on me as it does with all of us. Before we know it, we're terrified, especially once the numbers started going up and the city shut down. And so there was definitely a factor of fear, right? But we recognize that we all experience fear, no matter who we are, no matter what we look like, no matter how much or how little we have, we're going to experience fear. It's how we respond to that fear is what's able to catapult us forward. And sometimes when you're most afraid, you're not, you don't want anybody to say, well, God hasn't given you a spirit of fear. Well, did you see that 200,000 people have died? Did you see that 250,000 people have died? So fear is real. And so it's not to take away from those moments when we're fearful, but there are times when you just do not have the luxury of being afraid, when you have to move forward, when you have to get it done, when you have to make the tough decisions. And those decisions, sometimes they work out, on your behalf, and sometimes things get a little more complicated. But what I do know is that regardless of what the emotion was, right, whether it was fear or whether it was faith, that God was still with us in the midst of it all. And I think that is the one thing that helped keep me grounded and helped to keep us as a seminary grounded. And I know it helped to keep FCBC, grounded, as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing is that sometimes you can be afraid, but sometimes you just have to do it scared. And that's been sometimes the model, right? Sometimes one of the things that I tell myself is when I feel the fear is that the fear is not meant to stop me, but sometimes you just have to do it scared, which means that throughout the process, you might feel the fear, but it's about still stepping out in faith, as you mentioned, right? And trusting the God that has been with you season after season to carry you through the next season, even if your emotions are not necessarily in alignment with what God is trying to do in your life. So
absolutely. And that's real. And, I've often said this when I'm preaching, but, fear is just another emotion.
Yeah.
Just like being sad, and emotions can change from 1 minute to the next.
Right.
And so you're absolutely right. That fear is real, but sometimes you do have to move forward scared. I don't know if anybody's ever had the
Yeah.
experience of a surprise party. and you walk in and all the lights are out and you're fumbling around and you might feel a little scared because you hear something drop and it's like, oh my God, what's going on? And then all of a sudden everybody jumps out and say surprise. And you go from being fearful to being excited, happy, and surprised.
Right.
And so if we recognize that, right, that fear is not final, that whatever that negative emotion is that we're dealing with, whether it's fear, whether it's doubt, whether it's insecurity, those are feelings and they do pass.
Yeah.
Then it gives us the courage to know that we don't have to be, we don't have to succumb to fear because we recognize it's not going to stay with us forever. So yeah, sometimes we got to do it scared. Sometimes we got to do it the same way we do it happy, the same way we do it excited. It's the same way we got to show up and do it scared. So yeah.
So what I want to ask you, Pastor Lakeisha, if you had to define or maybe kind of put resilience in your own words of how you understood it in your life, spiritually, emotionally, professionally, how would you kind of define it and frame it for yourself and for other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, for me, I think resilience is having the capacity to endure or go through a very difficult time, challenge, or experience.
Right.
And to not have that difficulty have the last word, but to recognize that it is a part of the journey. And the reality is those things that don't kill us, right, or drive us crazy, or are the things that make us stronger. And so recognizing that no matter how difficult the situation, no matter how challenging the circumstance, we have the capacity to come through it and find ourselves stronger on the other side.
Right.
And so for me, that's what I think about resilient. You don't have to be resilient, to do something easy. Right? It doesn't take resilience, right, to do the easy thing.
Yeah.
But resilience is for those who have enough faith in themselves, in their God, and who they are in that moment, to be able to recognize that we're going to overcome it and we're going to go get through it. And so I would dare say that everyone who's watching us is resilient, no matter how weak they may think they are, right? No matter how messed up the situation may have been. If you are on the other side of it, then you have built up your capacity for resilience, And so for me, it is just about, you get knocked down, but you don't stay down. So when you get back up, that's resilience. So it's not that you don't fall. It take resilience. Well, yeah, it does take resilience to keep standing sometimes too. But that capacity of when you do get knocked down to just say, you know what, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to stay here. When you say that, you're operating in resilience.
You said something really powerful, which is I'm not one. You have to, it sounds like first and foremost, you have to make a decision, even prior to almost you engaging that situation or that circumstances. You have to make a decision that says, I'm not going to succumb to this, no matter what comes my way. So it sounds like even before, you have to prepare yourself for the battle of life, and the journey of life, which to your point, which is what you said, is that there are going to be moments where we fall, and falling and, making mistakes are part of the journey, but it's about the response to that. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you know what, I'm listening to you, and that sounds good, right? And that is what I said. But I think also there are moments when we exercise resilience when we're not even thinking about exercising resilience, when we haven't even made the decision. So when I think about, children who are resilient, right? Children who grow up in the worst circumstances, but still find a way to have a meaningful life, they're moving in resilience. And I don't know if a child has the capacity to say, to make the decision that I'm going to be strong or I'm going to be resilient. Sometimes children are just doing the best that they can with what they have. And I think that happens to us as adults sometimes as well. So sometimes it's not that I have to sit and make the decision. Well, what am I going to do? Am I going to, I think oftentimes that is required, but sometimes it's just a response, right? It is an innate response for survival. That pushes us forward in resilience. So I think it doesn't have to necessarily look one way. It can look many different ways, and particularly with children. And I've said before that I think those are the voices that we're missing, even in the midst of this COVID crisis. How this is affecting children. We're so busy thinking about how it's affecting us, and our freedom, our inability to do the things that we want to do and to gather the way we want to gather and to celebrate the way we want to celebrate, that we are forgetting about how this is affecting, our children. And they are our future. So that's really, I guess that's another talk for another time, but their resilience, right, is an example to all of us. I know it's an example and an inspiration to me.
Yeah, and I think you made a very good point about that. Thank you for helping to kind of clarify that a little bit more. And I think you made a very good point about the children. I've talked about this a lot in my check-ins, right? Is that when I'm talking to the mostly to the adults at FCBC, but also making sure that that they're taking account of our kids. Sometimes as a kid, it's a lot harder to understand why something is happening. Everything seems very logical. Why would that happen? And why can't I see my friends? And why can't I do this? And why can't I do that? And so I've often, when kids always ask very logical questions, and sometimes it's hard to share the nuance and the grays with with younger children. But to your point, a lot of kids are feeling the weight of this moment. And so just by the fact that most of them are just waking up every single morning, right? Just if it's the fact that you are taking one step in front of the other and getting on a Zoom meeting, even if you don't feel like getting on a Zoom meeting, right? I mean, I know we are all zoomed out, but for the simple fact that you just get up, and I think I appreciate you for kind of bringing that back, but just sometimes by showing up is resilience. And we don't oftentimes take that much into account as well. Yeah. Another way that I think I've understood resilience, Pastor Lakeisha, in this particular season for me is that resilience can also be rest. And, sometimes we think to get back up means I have to get back up to fight. But sometimes maybe I got to get back up just so that I can rest for the next fight. Yeah. And I think we, especially with 2020, and I think about it as a clinician from the perspective of a clinician, and I talk to people, is that everybody wants to get past the mourning and the grieving process. Everybody just wants to skip that part because it's painful to sit in your pain and to sit in your questions. And Pastor Mike, at the end of last year, really preached a very great sermon. And I think about how 2020 really truly impacted so many of us by changing and making us really come to terms with what it is that we believed about God, ourselves, and this world. And you don't just bounce back right away from that. That takes the same journey that you took to kind of get to that point. It's going to take another journey to get to a healing point. And so I'm curious to know if there's been a moment for you, Pastor Lakeisha, where resilience was rest, where you had to say in this moment, yes, I know I have to get back up, but I also need to take a moment to just pause and just reevaluate and to rest in this season as well.
Yeah, that is really a great question. And Resilience as Rest is a book that somebody needs to write, because
you never know.
Start writing. You're doing 3 of these. You're going to get a lot of good nuggets, pull, quote, do some research. But that is so real, because, this world does not give us permission to rest.
Yeah.
We have to take that for ourselves. If you're waiting on somebody to tell you to take a day off or get a vacation, you will rarely hear that.
Yeah.
And sometimes the people that we love might be the ones who can recognize our fatigue. But the reality is that rest is our own individual responsibility. And so even when we think about the Sabbath, right, and there's so much to be said about the Sabbath, and how we celebrate it, or those that don't, and how you're not supposed to work, and what happened with Jesus on the Sabbath. But Sabbath really is, an opportunity for us to take a step back from the worries and the cares of this world, and retreat in a place with ourselves and with God, where we can be still and be quiet. Rest does not always mean sleep, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but there have been times when things were so there was so much havoc in my life
Yeah.
that I would lay down tired and I would wake up still tired. So I had slept for 7 hours or 8 hours, but I woke up like hitting the snooze button because I wasn't ready to start it all over again. And so it's important for us to recognize that rest, it can be sleep, but not always.
Mhm.
But it's also just an opportunity to get away by yourself, shutting off the noise of the world and that chatter. It may for some rest is sitting and watching movies. For others, rest is, going for a walk. For someone else, rest might be dancing, if they haven't had an opportunity to do that. And so it is important to recognize, what does rest look like, particularly in this season? Because the other piece that we have to be thoughtful about is too much rest, right?
Yeah.
Can lead us on a different path,
Right.
paths of passion, kind of replaying things over in our minds. And so being thoughtful about what the parameters of rest look like for us.
Right.
But I believe that rest is a huge part of resilience. And at some point, we have to be willing to turn it off, to step away, and to recognize that, guess what? If you are not there, the world will move on. you know, it may not move the way you want it to,
Come on.
but the world keeps going. The next minute is going to come, whether you're there or not. The next hour is going to show up, whether you want it to or not. We cannot stop time, but we can stop ourselves and give ourselves an opportunity to rest in love, rest in God, rest in peace, rest in joy.
Yeah.
Rest in sleep.
Yeah.
So many ways to rest. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, resilience as rest. I'm going to be waiting on that from you. Yeah.
And the reason why I think you mentioned is that you said it's so many different things, because it doesn't have to be sleep, right? It can be just being silent with yourself, because so many times resilience could just be the willingness to allow God to speak to us.
Yeah.
We are constantly moving, constantly going, and sometimes it's just needing connected to get connected back to the source, right? The source that feeds you, the source that strengthens you, the source that, it's like, if you think about it, when you think about my laptop, right? I put my laptop charger, and that's the source. And if it starts dying out, so I got to I got to put my battery back in. And I think it's the same way, in sort of this relationship that we have in this journey called life, is that we have to remain consistently connected to the source. So whatever, in this instance, the source is God for us, but the source can be a lot of different things. But in this instance, we want to acknowledge that our source is God. You mentioned also something else, which was, you kind of hinted to this idea of agency a little bit, right? Which is, it is your responsibility, right, to take on your needed, your desire for rest. I'm curious, agency is such a powerful thing. We often don't talk about the power of agency, even within our Christian faith. Everything is, sometimes people don't believe that they are also co-collaborators and co-creators with God, but we are. And so I'm curious, in this idea of the power of agency that God has really kind of given us, how do you think, one, that it helps us kind of strengthen our perseverance? And secondly, in strengthening our perseverance and this agency that God has given us, how can we, one, hone in and really kind of like lean into that sense of agency to empower us to say that, like, we are also divine beings and we can operate in that power?
Yeah, the notion of agency, I think, is where sometimes we as Christians or believers can get caught up with what is our responsibility versus what is God's responsibility. I remember, as a little girl, as I was a fighter. I was a big fighter. I had fights all the time. And so,
like,
fighter.
You mean like physically or like verbal?
No, physical.
Okay.
So I will never forget, I was in the 7th grade, and I had this fight, right? Now, by the time I got to this fight, I had already had enough fights that I had been, in school suspension, after school suspension, total school suspension. Back then they still paddled. So I had gotten paddled like twice already. And so I had another fight. And it was just like it was the straw that broke the camel's back. My principal was disgusted.
So funny.
Yeah, it was terrible. They sent me to a special school for special children.
I did not know this. Wow. I feel like
I got to that school and I was looking at those. I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. But, I was really angry with the world for a lot of reasons, and that's another conversation. But I remember going home and I was so scared, of what my mom was going to say, and she was so disappointed, and she said, what happened this time? It was the kind of what happened this time. I was like, oh, that's where we are. What happened this time? And she said, I started saying, well, Mom, she did this and she did that, and she said, stop.
Wow.
I was like, no, but she did this. And she said, no, stop. She said, what did you do? And I was just looking at her in shock. And she said, I have told you time and time again, you cannot control what anybody else does. The only thing that you can control is yourself and what you do and what you say. And I'll add to that, and we should not expect for anyone else to do anything for us that we ought to do for ourselves, to serve in a capacity for us that we ought to serve in ourselves. That was the first time that I really heard or identified with the notion of having agency. And that was in seventh grade because of a fight. But I think it extends not only to those kinds of situations, but even in relationships, right? I've heard women, say, and I've said, I'm just looking for a man that's gonna make me happy. Well, it is not somebody else's responsibility. I'm trying to help somebody right now.
It's 2021.
Responsibility to make you happy. Could you imagine how much responsibility that would be for? I got to make myself happy. I got to make my husband happy. I got to make. No, you got to find your own happiness, right? You got to find your own happiness. And if you are engaged in a relationship where someone makes you smile and makes you laugh and brings some additional joy to your life, well, that is beautiful. And that is what we're called to do, right? But if you are miserable and you're miserable because you're looking and depending on someone else to make you happy, then you have missed the whole notion of what agency is.
Right.
And so when we reclaim our agency, right, and recognize that we have the capacity to do all that God has called us to do, plus some of the stuff we want to do ourselves, right?
We have dreams too.
Visions. There are things that we want to do. It's only when we reclaim that power, right, and recognize it's not somebody else's fault. Or, we've all said this, well, she made me do it. No, she didn't. No, she didn't. She may have done something that made you upset, but you then made the decision to do whatever it is that you chose to do. And so that agency not only is appropriate when we are looking to, improve our lives and take ownership of our own happiness, but it's also important in assuming responsibility and accountability for the times that we are operating outside of where we would like to be operating as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, agency is such a
You're still on the fact that I was fighting, right?
Listen, I don't think you understand I don't know if you can see the comments, Pastor Lakeisha, but everyone afterwards was saying they were like, Pastor Lakeisha got them hands. So those were all the comments that were coming in. So I was trying not to laugh as you were talking because everybody was like, PL got them hands. I was like, oh.
God. Yeah, it was terrible. You have to ask my mom. I can't even imagine what it was like to parent me, honestly. I was a good child. Let me fix it.
Like, let me fix it. Let's roll back.
I was on the honor roll, but don't cross me. I had low tolerance for foolishness. And at that time, I didn't know that there was an alternative way other than putting the hands up and going to it. And I dare you to knock this leaf off my shoulder. The millennials don't know nothing about that. Y'all spend so much time on the computers that y'all don't know what it was like to be outside in the street playing
Oh
kickball,
my
dodgeball,
goodness.
you know, into a little tussle with somebody and going at it and like, oh, you want some of this? Knock this leaf off. Knock this off my shoulder. Let me show you how it's really going down.
I've
Yeah.
never heard that phrase before. Knock that leaf off my wow. So let's just say you had a lot of resilience because you was just like, listen, I'm not about to take nothing from nobody. But I think what you're also really you learned sounds like, well, the powerful lesson that you learned at a very young age, the power of agency. And that was really, to be honest, for me, Pastor Lakeisha, is something I didn't even learn till later, this concept of agency. And there's something in clinical terms that we use, it's called the internal and external locus of control. And for somebody who has the internal locus of control, is that belief that you have the power and that to change your circumstances. And we oftentimes say that for resilience, those who have a higher internal locus of control tend to be more resilient, because their belief is that one, I no matter what is happening around me or to me, I still have the power.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And that is true. And the issue is, where does that internal locus of control come from?
Yeah.
And I can tell you honestly, for me, it came from, watching my mother in an abusive relationship, seeing my stepfather, physically abuse her. It came from my stepfather, sexually abusing me.
Right.
And so I developed, this sense of, nobody's going to hurt me again. And that's where the fighting came from. So it wasn't that I was born this fighter.
Yeah.
It were the things that happened along my journey that changed my perspective in a way that it caused me to be defensive all the time.
Right.
And to think that someone was out to get me, someone wanted to hurt me, someone wanted to take advantage of me. Not only did it negatively impact me, as in my teenage years, having to go to the special school and everything, but then it also impacted me, as I got older, even in my marriage, because then, I had to decide one day, that my husband wasn't trying to hurt me, because, he was one of those people, anyone who's outside of me who had the capacity to hurt me, who had the capacity to damage me. And I had made the decision that was not going to happen to me again. And so that resilience, right? So there are lots of pieces of resilience along the way. That resilience from coming out of that abusive household, the resilience to defending myself, but then also there was resilience in changing my mind and deciding that I didn't want to have that life of being a fighter and the places that fighting, can lead you. And then also being resilient in my marriage, to be able to have the wall when I thought I needed it, but also to let that wall down, to recognize that this was my partner, and this wasn't someone who was trying to hurt me. And so I think it looks different. It doesn't always, look brand new and shiny. Sometimes it looks messy, sometimes it can look bloody, but it's with us, still the same.
I think you just said something, because all I kept hearing when you were talking, Pastor Lakeisha, was coping. And I think, because you just talked about the ways that resilience can manifest itself, it can be different things. And sometimes a coping mechanism can be your way of staying resilient in that moment and in that season. And maybe the coping mechanism may not be the thing that you stick with for the rest of your life, but it allows you to survive a season. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes we see coping mechanisms, and I've been even looking at myself of how I've been coping with my own grief and my own, from the losses that I experienced in 2020. And I had to say to myself, it's okay, because this is what's keeping you resilient. This is what's keeping you strong. But in due season, this cannot be the thing it can't be your crutch. You can't do it. And you have to make a decision to say, okay, how do I move from this moment, on, while I'm still trying to cope with what is happening to me.
Yeah, and that's real. I definitely appreciate you saying that. It goes back to me with giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission, to be sad. We have to give ourselves permission to cry, because we don't want to cry. We don't want to look weak. We don't want to, get stuck. Some of us are like, well, I start crying, I'm not going to stop. But yeah, we have to give ourselves permission to feel and embrace the emotions that we are feeling. You said something earlier about folks really not wanting to grieve. You know, I don't have time for that. I got to get on to the next and something else to do. And I got to go to work and I still got to take care of my kids. But if we don't take that time that we need to feel what we feel now, it will come back to haunt us, really.
Yeah.
And it depends on how well we take care of it.
Yes.
How long it haunts us.
Yes.
You know, I gave an example one time of, you know, it's like a cut. You know, if you get a cut, you know, maybe on your arm, and you cover it up and it heals, but it hasn't healed all the way. If it's not healed all the way, eventually you're going to see some pus come out from the side.
Right.
And sometimes we try to heal without taking the time that we need to do the internal work that we need to do. And then, you know, a month later or a year later, the pus starts coming out. Mm-hmm. And we wonder why we're so angry or why we're so depressed or, you know, why we feel so manipulated. It's because we did not allow the wound to heal properly. We did not put the Neosporin on and the alcohol on. And the reality is the same way we have to do that for an open cut on our arms. Imagine the work that we have to do for the cuts in our hearts, right? For the cuts in our heads, right? That we have to do that healing work. And so maybe you don't have time for it today, but I would suggest a part of being resilient is making the time to care for yourself in a way that's going to push you forward and help you to be stronger on the other side of this, as opposed to pretending that everything is okay, pretending, and we know how to do that well too. You know, many of us, we learned pretending from the time we were children. I know I learned it because being in an abusive household, I had to pretend all the time that everything was okay. And so you acquire that skill of pretending. And before you know it, you're doing it at times when it's really not even necessary. A coping strategy, right? That has followed you into adulthood when you don't really need it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it's about releasing those coping strategies that are no longer adequate, that no longer, you know, fit the bill for you, and recognizing that, you know, we, you know, especially as women, and I'll say this, you know, from the time I was a child, right, we heard all of the Disney, you know, Snow White being rescued, you know, by the huntsman. You have Little Red Riding. I mean, you have all of these childhood characters, Barbie and Ken. And so it tries to teach you, right, that you need to be rescued. Yeah. And not only that you need to be rescued, but that somebody's going to rescue you and some man is going to rescue you. Yeah. And that is what we learn from the time we're 5, 6, 7-year-olds. And so we grow up, you know, looking for this man to come and rescue us. When the reality is, you know, we got to rescue ourselves. Yes. You know, God has given us, you know, exceedingly abundantly above all that we can think or ask, according to the power that is at work where? In us. And so we have the power given by God and in relationship with God and believing in God and believing in ourselves. We have the capacity to do what we need to do to heal, whether it's reading a book, whether it's listening to a video, watching a video, listening to a tape, whether it's sitting and praying and meditating. We have the capacity to develop the skills that we need in order to live the best life. Yes. Okay. I see this damsel in distress. Yeah. Where's Prince Charming? You know? But yeah, at some point we have to learn to gain some different understanding about who we are and about the power that we have internally.
And all I kept hearing as you were saying that is resilience is you being the hero of your own story. Yes. You are the hero of your own story.
You are your own hero. And if you take the time to look back over your life, you will realize that you've always been the hero.
Oh God, you don't run my apartment. Stop. Don't do that. Don't do that. You don't think you're right. Don't do that.
You've always been that hero. You're looking for it externally.
Come on.
Not realizing that it's always been with you. Yeah. The power has always been with you. You've always picked yourself up. Yeah, somebody might have helped you, but they couldn't have got you up if you didn't participate. You always found a new way. You always got over whatever it is you were going through. Maybe not in the way you wanted, but you got over it, you got through it, you got past it with
Yeah.
the grace and by the grace of God.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you are your own hero. You've been your own hero. And guess what? You can continue to be your own hero. Absolutely. That's good. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you for that alley oop. That's what it was. You gave me that nice alley oop.
Good.
I
Good.
think we can collaborate. I think this book is going to be a collaborative effort. We're going to co-author this book together. So I think we touched on a lot of different, concepts, and I want people to kind of walk away maybe some practical spiritual things, some spiritual practices. And I know one of the, you are like Pastor Keisha. I admire you so much because you have some very strong spiritual practices that you utilize in your life that you're very disciplined about. And I can imagine that those things also help you to remain resilient. So I want you to, if you could share some spiritual practices that you've done, or maybe just ones that you know would be good for people to implement, daily, monthly, to kind of help them stay strong and resilient.
Yeah, that's good. You know what? I really believe that finding the things that bring you joy, discovering those things that bring you joy, are really the key to living your best life, and recognizing that the things that bring you joy may not be the things that bring someone else joy.
Yeah.
Sometimes we always want to do stuff with someone, but sometimes it's when we spend that time with ourselves that we really experience the most joy. And so I would say, of course, I love the spiritual disciplines. Praying is always a calmer for me, especially when I don't do all the talking.
Whew, say that one more time.
Right? Especially when I don't do all the talking. You've been on that one-sided relationship where every time you try to get a word in, the person just keeps on talking till finally you just give up. Some of us got God like, are you gonna let me say something? Or are you go, because we talk the whole time. So I think that sitting, that meditation, that being thoughtful, certainly reading scripture can help calm, a restless mind. I love to practice solitude, being by myself with God. You can do that walking, talking, spending time, looking at the trees, observing nature, bird. I saw on the news, it was talking about the number of bird watchers has increased since COVID. But enjoying nature. We are created as a part of nature, intended to be in cooperation with nature. And so the more time we spend with it, I think the healthier we are, and the lighter we are. And so I think it's a matter of determining. There's a great book by Richard Foster called The Spiritual Disciplines. And he talks about prayer, he talks about study and solitude and meditation and celebration. And though there are so many practices that you can incorporate into your daily life. But also, one of my spiritual practices is dancing. I love to dance. I love to dance. And initially I didn't realize that it was a spiritual practice. And then when I realized, I was like, you know what, this is feeding my soul.
Wow.
This is, it's making me whole. I didn't mean to rhyme that, but it's feeding my soul. It's making me whole.
You're a rapper too, low key. We see you. We already got you. We know you're a rapper too.
Real low, real low. But I had started taking, and I've shared this, I've started taking salsa lessons several years back, and I would go to class once a week. It was an hour and a half class. And the reason that I love, and I hope this helps someone, the reason that I love salsa is because when I am engaging in salsa dancing, I can't think about anything else except what I'm doing in that moment.
That's good.
Sometimes we engage in practices and we think we're practicing, engaging in a spiritual practice, but we're not, because our minds aren't there.
Yeah.
We're praying, we're meditating, but we're thinking about what we have to do next.
Right.
We're praying, but we aren't giving God an opportunity to even speak to us. And so it was when I realized, when I am dancing, all I'm thinking about is dancing. I got to think about, where does my left foot go next? Okay, where does my hand go next? Do I turn to the left or to the right? So I can't think about work. I can't think about school. I can't think about students. I can't think about preaching. All I can do is engage in that act of dancing.
Yeah.
And it is that act of being present
Yeah.
with myself,
Yeah.
right?
Good.
And while I'm being present with myself, being thankful
Yeah.
to God for the opportunity for
Yeah.
that hour and a half
Yeah.
of, to me, solitude, because even though I'm dancing with someone else, I'm really dancing with myself.
Yeah.
And
Good. I really
listen, I'm saying I am. Right, because when you're salsa dancing, you
yeah.
dance with everybody in the room. Like you switch partners because they want you to get used to dancing with different people and the different moves that they're teaching you. But I realize I'm dancing with them, but I'm really dancing by myself. I'm really dancing with God. And so the fact that I haven't been able to dance, salsa dance,
I was just about to say that you can dance.
um, so I do dance by myself. It's certainly not as much fun. But that is, I realize that can be, nobody has listed dancing as a spiritual practice, but man, it can be. Nobody lists singing as a spiritual practice, but man, it can be.
Come
When
on.
you are singing from the bottom of your heart
Yeah.
to the God who created you, the one that loves you, the one that restores you and redeems you and heals you and listens to you and comforts you,
Yeah.
and you're singing a love song to God, that's why I can make up a song at the drop of a dime.
Come
At
on.
the drop of a dime, because that love for God is flowing from
Yeah.
my heart. So
Yeah.
that is a spiritual practice. So your spiritual practices don't have to be limited
Yeah.
to what someone wrote in a book or what someone preached about. It
Mm.
is that thing that you can do, whether it's singing and praying, traditional, whether it's praying and fasting or meditating, traditional, or whether it's singing and dancing, I would say those are non-traditional spiritual disciplines. It is that thing that you can do when you do it, you don't have to have anybody else there with you. You can do it, by yourself, with yourself, and you're doing it for yourself. And when you do it, it makes you smile, it brings you joy, it makes
Yeah.
you laugh.
Yeah.
You're not able to think about the terrible thing that happened because you're so present.
Thanks.
Ah, that's really the gift of the spiritual discipline,
Come
is
on.
being
Fully
present in
present.
that moment
Yes.
without any disruption or interruption. So I would dare to say to everyone who's watching, find that thing that you love to do, that you don't really need anybody else to do with you, that thing that brings you joy, that thing that calms your spirit, that calms your soul, um, and engage in that thing.
Yeah.
When you get nervous, do that thing. When you get scared, do that thing. When you're doubting yourself, do that thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can talk our way through it, but sometimes for me, I got to dance my way through it. I'm in the kitchen cooking, I'm dancing. My husband's like, what do you, ain't even no music. I'm just, the music is in my heart, it's in my head. So even, when I think about our students and all that they've gone through, when I think about the congregants at FCBC and all that they've gone through in the midst of COVID, is finding those things that bring you the most joy. And those things can operate as your spiritual disciplines,
Right.
because God gives us a joy that the world can't give and the world can't take away. And so when we are, embracing that joy, we're embracing God. So it doesn't have to be secular or, anything like that. It can just be you
Yeah.
loving the capacity of you and God doing whatever it is that brings you the most joy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You said so much good stuff. I'm like, I wish I could have wrote most of it down, but I was like, I was getting my life. But one of the things that I really admire about what you just said is this idea and this notion about being fully present.
Yeah.
And when you think about like meditation, that's really all that it is, right? Is the ability to allow yourself to be fully present in that moment. Because to be fully present allows you to, I think it makes it easier for you to connect to the source. Because whenever I'm not present, or whenever I'm anxious or thinking about all the 20 things that are coming down the line, or all the ways that something can go wrong and all the bad things that can happen, that is the anxiety of that moment stops me from fully being present, to which that resilience within me can rise up.
Yeah.
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 And I think like that to me is, there are so many different I don't know, what characteristics to what can maintain and build resilience. And we talked about all that, which is like being present. Resilience is dancing. Resilience is healing. Resilience is rest. Resilience is you being the hero of your own story. And I think it shows us that resilience is so many different things. It can be so many things to so many people. It can manifest itself in so many ways. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because then no one's resilience will look like somebody else's.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's the key right there.
Yeah, no one's resilient. And a lot of the times, and if I'm going to be fully transparent for myself, that has been something that I would admire everyone else's resilience, because I would be like, okay, I'm an emotional person, so crying can't be resilience, because I see other people who, when stuff happens to them, they're strong, right? They're able to withstand that moment. But having to realize that my resilience is not going to look like somebody else's.
Yeah, that's good.
For me, it may be that I actually do need to cry, right, in my own little corner somewhere, and then I come out, and then I emerge, and then I engage the world again. Yeah. And that doesn't take away from my strength or from somebody else's ability to do it differently. It just means that we're all uniquely different. We're all uniquely created by God in a unique way. And I think if we can begin to lean into our gifts and lean into who we are and acknowledge that, I think it makes resilience a much easier process. We're at 7:56 and we're gonna close. I know everyone's loving this conversation. Everyone's there's so much. I want to read the comments. But what I want to do is I want to give you guys all an opportunity to at least be able to ask us some questions this evening. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to ask Pastor Lakeisha one more question, and then she'll have a little final word of encouragement. She might take us into a little sermon. I don't know, a little sermonette. I'm joking. But in this meeting, while I'm asking Pastor Lakeisha this question, the rest of you guys, we would love for you guys to, if you have any questions or anything that we said that you want us to elaborate on more, this would be a perfect time to be able to ask that question. One of the things that I had a chance to read in sort of the preparation and understanding resilience was that in the Buddhist tradition, there is this idea of this alternative point of view. And they developed this kind of alternative point of view to help people build resilience, because if you have this point of view about your life, then it allows you to keep bouncing back, your perspective of how you see the world. And I think the Christian faith lends some of that as well. And I think there's probably some alignment. So I kind of want to get your perspective on these three alternative viewpoints and how, how these viewpoints can help us be resilient. And is this in alignment, or are there viewpoints within the Christian faith that we can sort of adopt that is antithetical to the world? The world has a viewpoint, and us as believers have what Pastor Mike always says, a countercultural viewpoint. And so their viewpoint is, their first mark is terrible things happen, and suffering occurs. Second is everything changes. And third, there is no self. Yeah. What would you say about all of these three things, and how can they help us be more resilient?
Yeah, that is a great question. I actually took a class when I was at seminary, and one of the books that we read in the class was called "Without Buddha, I Couldn't Be a Christian." Oh. Yeah, by Paul Knitter is the professor, and he was the actual professor when I took the class. So without Buddha, I couldn't be a Christian. And what he said was there were a lot of the Buddhist teachings that helped inform who he was as a Christian, who he was as a follower of Jesus. And so it was one of the best classes that I took. I really didn't want to take it, because in my mind, I was a Christian. I didn't need to learn anything about Buddhism or any other religion, because, I had it all together. And what taking that class did is expose me to, the many paths to God. I have my path, I honor it, I love it, but I can't take away from someone else's path. And so these teachings about suffering, it is absolutely true. Everyone is going to suffer. It doesn't matter what you have or what you don't have or who you think you are. Everyone suffers. Sometimes we are so busy thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. Oh, well, if I had $1 million, I wouldn't suffer. But you have millionaires who are committing suicide. So we don't know what that looks like. And so recognizing that suffering is a part of life. But we also know, based on our conversation tonight, is resilience to suffering is
Yeah.
also a part of life. And
Right.
so sometimes we're so focused on the suffering that we neglect the resilience, right? And so I would say that goes into that counterculture, that change in perspective. It's all about what you look at and what you focus on. And so sometimes, in order to strengthen and encourage ourselves, let's focus on not the mountain, but the fact that we got over it. You know,
Yeah.
not the difficulty, but the fact that we got through it.
Yeah.
Not the heartbreak, but the fact that we're loving again. You know, that is the counterculture
Yeah.
that we have to embrace. Everything changes. Absolutely. We're changing right now. We
Yep.
are different now than we were an hour ago when we started this conversation. We
Yeah.
see that even in looking at the life of a child from the time they are born until the time they age. Things are always changing. The world is constantly changing. It's the way that God created it. God
Yeah.
did not create us to be stagnant beings. We
Mhm.
are supposed to be moving and resting and shifting and engaging, because that's what the world is doing around us. Um, and so this notion also of no self, I had a hard time embracing that until I came to understand that it's absolutely right. There is no self, because the self you were when you were 2 is different than the self that you are when you're 10, which is different than the self you are when you're 25, which is different than the self you are when you're 55. It continues to change because of the experiences that you have. So as soon as you think you know yourself,
Yeah.
something happens to give you an opportunity to learn something new about yourself. How many of us went into 2020 just very self-aware, very, secure about who we were? We were right.
Right
We
here.
we all the themes, 2020 vision, this is the year of clear vision and sight, and COVID came and
COVID.
it knocked every one of us
Everyone.
off of our feet. It
Yeah.
knocked every one of us in some way, in some day, it
Yeah.
knocked every one of us off of our feet. I remember my husband walking around taking his temperature. He has a thermometer.
It is just walking around.
He kept it in his pocket. He's taking his temperature. You think I have it? You think I have it? From that to,
Right.
me trying to figure out, oh my God, what are we going to do? And how are we going to go online? And what are we going to do with our students? And how are we going to make sure, it knocked every one of us. But guess what? We all learned something new about ourselves. We learned how strong we were. We learned how resilient we were. We learned how we could move from being fearful to moving in courage. We learned our capacity to endure, what we were hoping would only last for a month or a week or a day. And now we're almost a year later. We are actually a year later. And we're still standing and we're still surviving and we're still living and loving and serving. And so recognizing that there is no self can be freeing,
Yeah.
because it gives you permission again to evolve.
Yeah. To evolve.
When you
Yeah.
say that we are an ever evolving community, in
Yeah.
order to have an ever evolving community of visionaries, dreamers, and doers, we have to be an ever evolving individual who is a visionary and a dreamer and a doer. That's what makes up the community. It's the
Right.
individual. And so when we embrace our capacity to evolve, man, that's when we really start living. When we can say, I'm different now than I was 5 years ago,
Yeah.
that's when we really don't want to be the same when you're 40
Yeah.
than you were when you're 20. Right? You want to learn, you want to grow, you want to evolve. Give yourself permission, to live that life that God has created us to live. I'm all over the mission statement right now, but it's so true. You
Yeah.
know, I'm gonna have to tell Pastor. I don't know if he's watching that. The talking about the Buddhist traditions led me right to the mission statement, to the
Yeah.
identity statement, the
Exactly.
purpose statement,
Yeah.
because that's who we are. So I would absolutely agree with those tenets, and I think that those are three tenets that help us to recognize our own resilience through
Yeah.
suffering, right? Through everything changes,
Yeah.
and recognizing that we ourselves are not ourselves because we're constantly growing. So the self you were yesterday is not the self you are today. Thank God.
Thank God. So just don't get too attached.
Right.
Don't get too attached. And that's like, I think for myself, all of these three tenets, the biggest one I would probably say is that everything changes. Even though you think you know that, just kind of going into every situation, and also realizing that people change. And I can imagine that this particular year, Pastor Lakeisha, to kind of that there were a lot of couples that had to be resilient this year. I'm not, and I can imagine just from the people that I've had to talk to. I don't have a partner, but from people I talk to, people I know, and so I'm curious, Pastor Lakeisha, if you could just, as I'm asking people to Ian can pull up some of the questions for some of the couples who may be watching today. How can they possibly, in this moment, maybe through these 3 tenets, build resilience, within their relationship in this moment? And what does that even look like for people who have a partner or a spouse in this season?
Yeah, that is real. There have been a lot of challenges in this season with partners, particularly when 2 people who are used to going in different directions for 8 to 10 hours a day had to now work from home and figure out how to work that out. I think that these tenets of recognizing suffering, of recognizing that things change, of recognizing that there is no self, can help us even in our relationships. Sometimes I think we get so focused on the relationship that we forget ourselves, right? There's a book in me, right, called Don't Save Your Marriage, Save Yourself. And in saving yourself, you just might be able to impact and save your marriage. Yeah. But sometimes we're trying to pour so much into the marriage that we forget to pour into ourselves. Yeah. Because it was you that person fell in love with. It was you that person decided to be with. And so it was your authenticity. It was your experience. It was your love. And so, yes, the merge is real, but you still have to maintain your own identity. Yeah. I think within marriage and relationships, time together is just as important as time apart. Or I guess I should say time apart is just as important as time together. Being able to have some friends, get you some good girlfriends. I've said that before. Some good friends or some good guy friends, just people who, pour into your life, who are not looking for anything from you. If you got a friend that every time you turn around, they're asking for something, you're not a friend, you're a sponsor. Ooh, I felt I just blessed somebody's life right there. Oh God. Are you a friend or are you a sponsor?
Are you a friend? That's a sermon. Are you a friend or are you a sponsor? That's your next sermon.
Because friends support each other, pray for each other, encourage each other, are there for each other. Certainly there'll be some times that you need something that your friend can help, or your friend needs something that you can help, but that shouldn't be the totality of the relationship. Go somewhere by yourself. Take yourself to dinner. Whatever you're waiting on that person to do for you, do it for yourself. If you want her to send you some flowers, send yourself some flowers. If you want him to take you to dinner, take yourself to dinner. If you're waiting on him to take you on a vacation, take yourself on vacation. Some of the best vacations I've had was by myself. When you go on vacation by yourself, you don't have to get anybody's opinion. You can get up when you want to get up. You can go to bed when you want to go to bed. You don't have to wait to use the restroom for somebody to come out. You don't have to go in the other room to make a phone call. You don't have to tell nobody to be quiet. You don't have to share what you're going to watch on television or what you're going to listen to on the radio, or where we're going to which restaurant. You can go to a restaurant you want to go to.
Anywhere.
On vacation, treat yourself to the things that you're expecting somebody else to do for you. And guess what? 9 times out of 10,
come on,
9 times out of 10, they'll be like, "Who sent you those flowers?"
Don't worry. All you gotta do is don't worry about it.
Right, you gotta sign it from the one who loves you most. No, I'm not trying to get nobody in trouble. As long as you had a receipt, you gotta have a receipt.
Yeah, you gotta.
Oh, really treat yourself.
Yeah,
take care of yourself. If COVID has not taught us anything else in our isolation, we have had to learn to do things for ourselves in a different way than we would have expected.
Yeah,
I saw so many people go natural during COVID. I'm telling you, because they couldn't go to that hair, so they had to do their own hair.
I had to do my own.
I've seen people come off the nail. I mean, we had to learn how to take care of ourselves in a different kind of way. And that's resilience too.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I was realizing about like even with resilience is that sometimes it's not until your back is up against the wall till you're forced to innovate. And in this particular year, whether it's in relationships or whether it's in, jobs or whatever, it's once you're up against that wall and you're forced to innovate, sometimes you're surprised what will come out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll be surprised what will be birthed out of you when you're pushed up against the wall and life is telling you, you need to do this. And you're like, okay, I got to figure this out. There's literally no other options. And I think COVID, a lot of times we used to say this, and I heard this, it can't be done. Or I can't do this. Or that can never happen. And 2020 and continuing, because we're still in the pandemic, this new calendar year.
Yeah,
we just saw everything that has been happening in our country. But it is that moment when you realize and this year showed us, when your back is up against the wall and we are pushed as a country, we are pushed as people, we're pushed as a community, as an institution, as churches, that we can bring out the best in us, innovate the best out of us. And so I think what it says is that sometimes you don't have to be afraid of suffering, right? You don't have to be afraid of pressure.
Yeah, that's good.
You don't have to be, that doesn't have to scare you. Sometimes, and Pastor Mike has preached about this, is sometimes it's inviting that into your life can create resilience as well. Willingness to just say, you know what, this situation is not going to change. So you know what, I'm just going to make you a partner. We're going to be friends. Suffering going to be with me, suffering. We're going to be friends. If this is my situation is not going to change tomorrow. All right, let's link up. What we got to do. I'm going to talk to you. I mean, because you're not going anywhere.
That's good. And that's real. And it really speaks to, I saw someone ask a question, what about people who are single and live alone and who are alone all the time? And I think you just answered that question. What does it look like to embrace being alone? It's so funny. I've being executive pastor at FCBC for 15 years. I did a lot of counseling. And, the married women were often wishing they were single, and the single women were often wishing they were married. And so there is somebody who would love to be where you are, right now, but recognizing that your aloneness doesn't have to be loneliness. It can be an opportunity for you to explore yourself, to love yourself, to be with yourself in a way that some people don't ever get an opportunity to enjoy. Right. And so even though you're alone, right, even though you're by yourself, you don't have to be lonely. There are, of course, you have friends, of course, you have family, of course, you surround yourself with the people that love you. But also, what does it look like for you to embrace and take advantage of being alone? Right? What does it look like for you to, I used to be so jealous of single people. I had friends who were single.
You're jealous
and they could get up. Used to be. I'm telling you what, I used to be. Because I'm an empty nester now, so I'm good. But I used to have friends that would be like, "Oh, I'm going to Vegas this weekend." What? I could never go to Vegas at the drop of a dime because I had to get a babysitter. I'd have to, talk to my husband. I'd have to, find the resources. And I think single people have so many opportunities to do things that potentially married people don't necessarily get the opportunity to do. But when you're so busy looking at what you think someone else has, right, and the happiness that you think they have, that you miss the opportunity to be engaged with yourself, right? I've gone to the club with friends or to a restaurant with friends, and the ones who are looking the saddest rarely, know who wants to be.
Say that.
I'm just saying, it's not attractive.
Right.
Energy. The energy. Right. Nobody wants to be around that. I would be looking at my friend like, you looking for somebody to buy you a drink? Girl, I'm not even gonna buy you a drink right now. You gonna buy your own drink because you pulling me down. I need you to get your act together. I need you to get your life right now. So while you're single, enjoy being single. Enjoy it as much as you can. Find a book club to enjoy. Find a spinning class to take. Go, take a cooking class, go for a walk in the park, do all of the things that you can do with yourself and by yourself. And then when you're with people, then you can enjoy them as well. But it's all about perspective. If you think being single is the worst thing in the world, guess what? It's going to be the worst thing in the world. If you flip that thing and read some of these books about all the challenges that people have in marriages, maybe you can change your mind and recognize that being single is a blessing as well. Being married can be a blessing. Being married can be a blessing. Being married can be a challenge. Being single can be a challenge. And so it's all about perspective. So what does it look like, and what do you need to do to change your perspective and recognize that you're in the best place that you can be right now with the God who loves you and embraces you, and that you have the resilience that got you here to this place? Celebrate yourself. Girl, send you some flowers tomorrow. Who was that? Send yourself some flowers tomorrow.
I'm gonna send myself some flowers. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna post them. I'll be like, this is what Pastor Keisha told me to do yesterday. She told me to send myself some flowers. But no, I think what you're saying is very powerful. As someone that, that is single, for me, it was because I did, at one point feel alone. And then like what you just said, you can choose, you don't have to feel alone, right? It was because one, I was like, wait, once I started to like have fun with myself, I was like, I'm fun. I'm dope. I like me. Like, and just being able to enjoy the moments of quiet. And so perspective is huge in this particular, and in general with resilience, is sometimes it's just about literally shifting your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And not for nothing, right? I would rather be by myself alone than in a marriage and alone. And there are a lot of people who are alone in their marriages. So if you're going to be alone with yourself, by yourself, and learn to love yourself and appreciate yourself and value yourself, in a way that pushes you in the direction of living that life. I was looking, there's a travel club for single Black women. Go do something. Oh, this world is so big. There's so many experiences that are just waiting on you to make the decision to do something different. So I want to encourage you to try your best to change that perspective. And if you can't do it by yourself, to get some help to do that. There are therapists, there are counselors, there are pastors, there are groups that you can join and go to, because sometimes we need help. Sometimes we can't do it by ourselves. Sometimes we're in that place where we just need, that helping hand. So, but can you change your mind? Absolutely. Can you change your perspective? Absolutely. Can you start living your best life? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you're resilient.
So as we close, I want to definitely give you, one final opportunity to say one final word. But what I want to just share with everyone that was a part of this conversation, I think there were so many things that we talked about, and it ran from the gamut. And I hope there was something that you took away from this conversation that can help you be resilient. Some spiritual, and I think to summarize, in regards to spiritual practices, for those of you guys that are watching, it does not have to look like one thing. As Pastor Lakeisha said, it can be something that we deem secular. It can be dancing, it can be singing, whatever allows you to be fully present in that moment. And so I encourage you, for those that are watching today, if you, in this particular week, find something that will allow you to be fully present. Whatever that one thing can be. And even if it's for 30 minutes of that moment where you can fully be present, if it's dancing, if it's singing, if it's meditating, doing yoga, exercise, whatever it may be. If it's reading your Bible, if it's just sitting in silence, I encourage all of us to do that this week so that we can get connected to the source. And so, Pastor Lakeisha, there are so many people that are watching today. And listen, I'm just going to leave it up to you, because I feel like you have a way where we can be able to close in this moment. But there's so many people today who, even hearing our conversation, may not necessarily still feel like they are capable of being resilient because they just feel so overwhelmed by the pain in this moment. And I want to acknowledge that for those people, that resilience is not easy. It's not, but it's something that God has gifted us with the ability to do. It is innately a part of our human body. Like you said, sometimes we just do it without even recognizing it. And so for that person today, what would you say to them? How would you allow them to leave this moment in this conversation to know that they can be resilient and that they have been resilient up until this moment?
Yeah, to that person, I'm just going to say, just to be easy with yourself,
Yeah.
right? Give yourself the room that you need to feel what you're feeling, whatever that feeling is, whether it is sad, whether it is anger, whether it's despair, right? Whether it's rage,
Yeah.
um, whatever those feelings are, and don't beat yourself up because of how you feel.
Yeah.
Um, don't try to make yourself feel a way that you don't,
Yeah.
because you're not being authentic with where you are.
Yeah.
That pain is real and loss is real.
Yeah.
Loss is real. We've had so many folks lose so many people and not even have the opportunity to have a homegoing service or have a wake. Those things are very real. But at the same time, we cannot let that pain consume us, right? We can't let it be everything to us.
Yeah.
Because while there is pain, there's also joy.
Yeah.
There's also something that brings joy to us. While we are crying, there's
Yeah.
also something that can bring laughter to us.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking about the scripture, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, that Pastor Mike preached on a while back. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, right? So what that means is you can be afflicted, but not
Yeah.
be crushed.
Would not be
Right?
correct.
You can be afflicted, but not be crushed. We
Yeah.
are perplexed, but not driven to despair. You can be perplexed. You can be confused. You can be, it doesn't have to make sense, but it doesn't have to drive us to
Good.
despair.
That's
We
good.
can be persecuted, but
Yeah.
we're not forsaken. So the persecution comes, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that God has forsaken you. It doesn't mean, that God doesn't love you. It doesn't mean that God is not with you, right? We can be struck down, but not destroyed. Yeah, the striking is going to come. We will all be struck down,
Yeah.
but you are not destroyed
Yeah.
because you're still here.
That's
And
good.
because you're still here, you are resilient.
Yeah.
Whether you want to recognize it or not, I'm telling you right now,
Come on.
you are resilient. And I'm not lying to you, and I'm not making it up. But if
Yeah.
you're here and you have the capacity to open this computer or open your phone and watch this conversation about resilience, it is because that is who you are. You were attracted to the things that you already are. There was nothing that we said here tonight that you didn't really already know in some capacity. You
Yeah.
were reminded of
Yeah.
what it took for you to get here. And
Yeah.
so you are here now, and you are not forsaken. You are not crushed. You are not struck down. You are not destroyed. You are resilient. Embrace the strength of who you are while you love the rest of it. But you
Yeah.
got to embrace that strength, and know that you are here and that you are present and that you are strong. And the best is yet to come. Ah,
Yeah.
yes,
Thank
it
you.
is. Yes,
Whew.
it is.
Pastor
Yeah.
Lakeisha, thank you so much for that ending word. I believe that somebody was really blessed tonight. I do believe that somebody with that word was reminded of their strength.
Yeah.
And so that is our prayer for you all, FCBC family. That is the prayer for myself and Pastor Lakeisha, is that in this season that you are reminded of your strength, that you are reminded that you are resilient, that you have been resilient, that you can experience feelings and emotions, as Pastor Lakeisha said, but they are not going to kill you. Your
Yeah.
feelings and your emotions will not kill you. They are not. You are stronger than that. And so, I'm encouraging you. We're encouraging ourselves. And so, FCBC family, we want to just say thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pastor Lakeisha, for joining us. Thank you so much
Thank you for
for.
having me. This is wonderful.
Oh my God, we're gonna have to have you back again because we learned so many cool things about you in conjunction. So many cool things about you. I know I did, and we learned you got hands. You know what I'm saying? So next time as Lakeisha. But we're definitely going to have to, have you back on and continue discussing. And so next week, FCBC family, make sure you join us for what will be a good discussion, but also giving you guys some practical tips. And then in the third week. So FCBC family, we love you. We love you. And thank you so much for joining us
God
and
bless you
continue.
all.
Yes, you are resilient. God bless.
You are resilient. God bless. Okay.